Hi there, I'm Carrie from the Toft Alpaca Shop, and in this video we're going to be looking at provisional cast on and grafting. The method that I use for provisional cast on, it uses a crochet hook, a needle and some waste yarn. With grafting, it's like kitchener stitch, but what you're doing is you're grafting together the ends of two live sets of stitches, a cast on edge and a cast off edge. You have to do it that way, otherwise your stitches won't match. In this video we're going to be doing the provisional cast on. So this is a method that leaves your stitches live so that you can then graft them later to another piece of knitting. You can use them for socks, or we use it on our lacy stitch snood. So what I'm going to do is make a slip knot here. So it leaves your stitches live and you can then undo this waste yarn. So this is in effect what I'm going to call my waste yarn, because I'm not going to knit my whole scarf in this. It's a contrast colour, and a tip here is to make sure that this waste yarn is as high contrast as possible to the yarn that you're actually going to be knitting with. So my slip knot is on my crochet hook. My crochet hook crosses over the top of my knitting needle. My working yarn comes underneath my needle and goes over the top of my crochet hook. Then what I'm going to do is pull my crochet hook down, and I'm going to pull this stitch through this stitch on my crochet hook. Rearrange your yarn so that it's around this side to the front and underneath the stitches, and there you go. We've got one stitch on the crochet hook, one stitch on the knitting needle. When we go again, we cross them over with the crochet hook over the top. I'm just pinching here with my thumb and my first finger. Yarn comes underneath and over the top of the crochet hook. What I find it really easy to do, because it is tricky and can be a bit fiddly, is I literally pick this with my nails and just pull it through. Rearrange your yarn so that it comes down and under, and you're good to go again. So I'm just going to do a couple of these really slowly. So this comes through, I'm going to pick that off and through. There we go. Rearrange your yarn so that it's under. Pull those stitches down a bit. We go under the needle, we go over the top of the crochet hook, and we pull it through. Again, we bring the yarn down, cross it over, under the knitting needle, over the crochet hook, and on. I'll just do it one more time. So crossed over, over the top, yarn underneath, over the top of the crochet hook, we pull it through. We pull it through like so, rearrange our needle. Now once you get to the end, what you need to do is just slip that stitch onto your needle, which is easier said than done. It's being a bit slippy here. There we go. And I'm ready to start knitting. So this is a nice provisional cast on. What I would do if I was going to be knitting in a different in my actual yarn, I do a couple of rows, about 4 or 5 rows of this yarn, and then I change to the yarn that I actually want to use for my pattern. So that is a provisional cast on. Okay, so we've fast forwarded a little bit now, and I have got my provisional cast on down here. I've knitted a few rows in my waste yarn, and then I've started with the yarn that I want to knit my twist scarf in. We use provisional cast on and grafting, which is what this part of the video is going to show you, on our lacy twist snood. So what you'll be able to tell is that once we've just undone this little bit here of the provisional cast on, these stitches come away really easily. So I'm just gonna go ahead and undo that little bit there, make it a little bit looser, and then we can undo it later on once we've grafted the two sections together. So once we've undone that, this will undo very easily, and we'll be left with just our knitting yarn. So I've got these stitches on my needle. I've stopped in my main colour there, in my main yarn, and I've knitted a few rows in my waste yarn. And then what I'm going to do is bring these two edges together. I've kept kept the yarn from my knitting, and what I'm going to do is just hold those two together like so. So I can see the stitches of my first row of my actual knitting, and again I can see the last stitches here of my knitting. So my yarn is coming through this stitch here. What I need to do is go in one stitch. Let's just find that first stitch. This is the trickiest part, just getting yourself aware of where the stitches are, what they look like. So that's the first stitch there. Actually, let's just go, there we go, there's the first stitch. So I'm just going to pull this through. I'm going to go, bring the needle around, and I'm going to go in here into the first stitch and then into the second stitch and out. Then I'm going to come back to the top, and I'm going to go in where I came out and into, in where I came out and into my next stitch. Pull that nice and tight. Well, not too tight at this point, we can tighten it up later. So back down here into the stitch I came out of and out through the other stitch next to it. What I'm doing is I'm creating, it's just like Kitchener really, I'm creating a row of what looks like knitting but is actually sewing. So I'm going back into that stitch and out of the next one. This little bit here is being a bit pesky and getting in the way. There we go. I'm going into the next one and in through the one I came out of, back in there and out of the next stitch. At this point, do try and keep it quite loose, because then you can always go back and tighten them up. It's much easier to do it like that than to get to the end, find that your tension's really tight up here and then have to go back and loosen them all up. So again, I'm going to go back into the stitch I came out of and into my new stitch right here. There we go. Into the old stitch, out of the new one. And you just keep going ahead like this, in and out like that. And you can already see it's looking like a piece of knitting right there. So when we join up our lacy stitch snood, for example, it's going to give a really nice finish. Moving out of the old one into the new one. Out of the old one into the new one. There we go. We are going to fast forward right here, so I will be to the end of this row and you'll be able to see what I've done in and out. Okay, so you can see here that I have gone all the way along this row and I've joined it with the grafting. I'm just going to do these last few stitches. What I wanted to show you is that if you're grafting, you will always be half a stitch over. So you can see this one here, we've got half a stitch over it. It's not that you've done it wrong, it's just the way that the stitches sit together. That's completely normal, and it's half a stitch. It really, really doesn't matter. So I'm just going to go back in, just pop in here, go back into that one and out of this stitch, into that one and out of that one. Yeah, just the last ones here. In through there, out through this last one, And then we're just going to finish it off up here, going out of this one. Now I will fasten that off shortly. You can see that's made a really neat join. You can't really tell that we've grafted those two pieces together. If you flip it up the other way, you can see I've got my my stitches here, and I'm just going to undo. Those are the stitches that there you go, just pull those out. And this is from my provisional cast on. So those were the ones that I did at the end with the waste yarn. But basically you just go along and you'll undo this part here, and then the whole thing will unravel. And you'll end up with a nice, neat, grafted together piece of work.